This photo, taken in 1912, carries such a strange detail that no one has been able to explain it to this day. Look closely, everyone. Absolutely everyone is looking in the same direction, backward. Men, women, children, they all stopped what they were doing and turned toward something that stayed outside the frame. But the most unsettling part is that no one, to this day, knows exactly what they were looking at. This image went viral in mystery forums, amateur investigator communities, and even reached the hands of historians and photography experts. And do you know what's even more disturbing? There are records, official documents, that simply vanish whenever someone tries to find out what was really happening that day. But before I tell you what's so strange about this photo, I need to give you the context. Because only by understanding where, when, and how this image was captured, will you be able to realize just how bizarre and possibly unexplainable this moment truly is. The story begins here. This photo was taken on April 23, 1912, on a busy street in the city of Halifax, Canada. At the time, Halifax was an important port city, known for receiving ships from all over the world, especially the great transatlantic liners that crossed the North Atlantic. The day was cloudy, cold, and according to reports from the local newspapers, it was just an ordinary morning. People coming and going, workers unloading goods, ladies shopping, and children playing on the sidewalks. The photograph was taken by a professional of that era named Ernest Chisholm, a well-known local photographer who was often hired to capture scenes of everyday urban life. His goal that day was simple: to document ordinary life in the streets after an event that had shaken the entire world. And what event was that? The sinking of the Titanic. That's right. Just 1 week earlier, on April 15, 1912, the Titanic had gone down, and Halifax had become one of the central bases for recovering bodies and wreckage. The city was engulfed in an atmosphere of mourning, tension, and fear. People knew that ships were arriving with the belongings and remains of the disaster's victims. But, strangely, this photo wasn't taken at the harbor, nor anywhere near the ships. It was captured almost 2 kilometers away from the docks, on a street far from the naval activity. And this is where things start to get even stranger. Because, even though they weren't near the sea, everyone is looking, at the exact same time, at something that happened behind them. And now, you're about to understand exactly what makes this image so unsettling. Look closely. Notice every detail. Everyone, without exception, is looking back. But it's not a casual glance. It's not as if something had merely caught their attention. No, it's a fixed, frozen look of absolute shock. See this woman here? Mouth slightly open, eyes wide. And that man next to her, hands on his hips, body half turned, an expression that blends surprise and confusion. And the most curious thing is this child, holding the mother's hand but staring directly behind them, with an expression that, even in black and white, seems to show fear. But what were they seeing? The photographer, Ernest Chisholm, made no mention of it in his records. In fact, in the personal diary found years later, there is only one enigmatic note written in the bottom margin of the page for that day. Something strange happened, but it was better not to comment. That sentence alone would be enough to send chills. But when the film negatives were developed, something even more intriguing appeared. Right here, in the lower right corner, there is a silhouette. Something, or someone. But it doesn't look like a normal human being. It has no clear definition, It's a shadow, a vague shape, something that seems not to fully belong to that reality. And it's at this point that this photo stops being just an old image and becomes one of the greatest photographic mysteries in history. After the photo was developed and Ernest Chisholm's strange diary note was revealed, the image was filed away without much fuss, at least at that moment. For decades, it remained forgotten, along with other everyday records of Halifax life. But everything changed in 1974, when a local historian named James McCarthy received a batch of old photos to catalog at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. As he flipped through the images, he came across the photo, and immediately something caught his attention. What intrigued McCarthy the most wasn't just the fact that everyone in the picture was looking back, but what seemed to be at the exact point where they were all staring. He enlarged the image multiple times, and as the film grain began to distort, a shape became more and more evident. A translucent figure, about 2 meters tall, with outlines impossible to clearly describe. McCarthy, a self-proclaimed skeptic, didn't believe in supernatural theories, but unable to explain it, he decided to dig deeper. He started investigating the records of that day: newspapers, personal diaries, police reports. And that's when he found something disturbing. In the April 24, 1912 edition of the local paper, the Halifax Gazette, one day after the photo, there was a strange note in the popular reports section. Residents report hearing a high-pitched sound coming from the sky, followed by a sudden wave of cold in the Barrington Street area. Authorities found no explanation. The location described was exactly where the photo had been taken. But that wasn't all. McCarthy also uncovered the report of a police officer named Thomas Sullivan, recorded that same day. In the incident log, he wrote, "At 11:27 a.m., I was called by locals reporting a strange man at the corner of the street. Upon arrival, there was no one there. However, the ground was completely frozen, despite it being spring and no record of sudden temperature drops. This detail was confirmed by official meteorological records. At that exact time, Halifax registered a sudden drop of 11 degrees Celsius for only 3 minutes. After that, the temperature returned to normal." But what about the figure in the photo? In his search for answers, McCarthy consulted photography experts, physicists, and even ufologists. The first analysis was conducted by the photographic lab at Dalhousie University. The report concluded, "There is no evidence of compositing, double exposure, or damage to the original negatives. The image is authentic and shows no signs of manipulation." That eliminated any possibility of fraud. It was then that the most strangest, and at the same time most fascinating theory emerged. Among the museum's archives, McCarthy found an uncatalogued letter written in 1913 by an employee of the White Star Line, the company responsible for the Titanic. In the letter, the employee described a rumor circulating among sailors at the time. Some of the recovered bodies showed strange, circular burn arcs, as if they had been exposed to some kind of energy unknown to us. This information had never been publicly disclosed. It does not appear in official records or in the Titanic inquiry documents. But what could that have to do with the photo? When McCarthy cross-checked the dates, he realized that on the morning of April 23, 1912, the day the photo was taken, one of the ships transporting bodies, the Mackay Betton, had docked in Halifax. And here comes an even more shocking detail. An internal report from the ship mentions that when sailors opened one of the cargo compartments, they were startled by an intense light and a kind of deafening hum that lasted about 15 seconds and then vanished. This event was never explained. Coincidence or not, the time of that report was exactly 11:26 a.m. And according to forensic analysis of the lighting and shadows in the photograph, it was taken at 11:27 a.m. But the story doesn't end there. In 1987, an independent researcher named Dr. Alan Fitzgerald, a specialist in acoustic phenomena, decided to analyze the photo from a completely different angle. Using a process called visual spectral analysis, which converts visual patterns into sound frequencies, he subjected the image to this experimental method. The result was simply chilling. When the spectral